welcome to Sunrise Extra on this Wednesday. Hey, today we are talking about two school districts who made polar opposite decisions about their curriculum this week. Hillsborough schools last night voted to add in comprehensive sexual education curriculum to their schools after a packed school board vote last night at Glencoe High School.
I have never seen a bigger crowd. I mean, it was like a movie opening. Everybody came out. Yeah,
they had to move it to a bigger space in Glencoe High.
And by comprehensive, you mean?
That includes information about, you know, LGBTQ people, gender identity, issues and information, safe sex. Christine Pitawanich is here with us this morning because you have really been kind of studying up on this today in light of also battleground schools voting to get rid of the requirement to teach this kind of curriculum. So kind of give us a rundown of what this story is today, and then we want to kind of know how you guys think schools, you know, should deal with it.
Yeah, so kind of a stark contrast. You know, you've got Hillsborough, where there was a unanimous vote to expand to, you know, comprehensive sex ed, which, as you mentioned, includes a lot of different issues: sexual orientation, gender, LGBTQ, including, of course, all the standard, what you'd expect, kind of like abstinence, safe sex, so that's condom use, that kind of thing.
It goes well beyond just puberty and anatomy, which is kind of the other side of this coin.
Right, but in Battleground, they've been having the discussion for quite some time now as to how to update their sex ed. So it's been a long time coming, but it was on Monday night that the school board voted 3-2 to axe the requirement for its schools to then teach comprehensive sex ed.
Because it's not a requirement in Washington State.
Right, so Washington State has a requirement for HIV and AIDS education and also puberty. Kids have to go through an educational piece addressing puberty.
Anatomy piece again.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, when it comes to comprehensive sex ed, parents we spoke with said that they were concerned about the gender issues that were addressed in this comprehensive sex ed piece, as well as the LGBTQ issues that also arose.
So I know it sounds, the way it's worded, they're dropping the requirement to have sex ed. Do we know yet, I know we have to kind of dig into all the details, whether that means it's an individual school decision, or is it just gone?
I don't think it's gone because every single thing that I've read has said it in a way where it just says the requirement is no longer there. So I think we do have to ask a follow-up question of the school district and dial in on whether schools individually could potentially choose.
Yes, it's still an option that a student could take if they wanted to.
Right. And speaking of which, the option in Hillsborough, parents do have the option to opt their kid in, opt their kid out if they do not want their child in comprehensive sex ed.
I think you automatically are in unless you opt your child out.
Yeah.
So we wanted to know, we asked this question yesterday on Facebook, and Jay, you can just kind of zoom in on here. We asked, do you think sex ed, there you go. Let me tilt it down.
No, that's pretty
good. Do you
good.
think, what does it say?
Yes or
Should
no?
sex ed be taught in public schools? 84% of you saying yes, 16% of you say no. On Facebook here. I also launched a question on Facebook this morning that just says, you know, what do you think? Do you think comprehensive sex ed should be taught in schools?
People are already weighing in big time.
We've gotten some comments. And go ahead, Brendan.
MBB, never. And then Jamie Ralston is weighing in. We need to talk about it more, not less, all caps. And then we have Jennifer saying no. Lisa says no. Let's see, Jamie also says parents always had the option to opt their kids out. Yeah, exactly.
I think that, I mean, the crux of this, Christine, and a lot of what battleground parents were debating about that led to this vote last night to, you know, axe the requirement is, they were saying in Battleground there's a lot of very Christian and religious families. And a lot of them think that if you talk about this in school, if you talk about gender identity, they, them, instead of, you know, he, her, or becoming transgender or whatever, that it over-sexualizes kids, they think. And it promotes switching genders or switching gender identity
Lifestyles that they're not comfortable
versus
with,
just information, and they're not comfortable with that. And other health experts were saying this doesn't change it's not going to change a child's gender. It's giving them the information, and also as a society for now how we kind of speak and act in our world now.
Yeah, so that was a big concern, I think, among some of the parents who were against comprehensive sex ed in Battleground, saying, as you said, this kind of comes into conflict with their faith.
Right.
But yeah, we spoke with a health educator from Multnomah County Health. They tell us there is no research that backs the idea that talking about gender issues can change someone's gender, but then also there's no research saying that talking about sex ed or talking about
safe sex or condoms is
will
going to make you have more.
Right, so that's another thing.
Right.
Parents were concerned that if you were to talk about all this stuff in the classroom, that kids would start having sex earlier, but the research is not there to back it up, at least according to Multnomah County Health officials.
What age, to me as a parent, it's all about the age. I'm okay with the subject, but what age are we talking about that these school districts are proposing?
Typically, it's right around 5th grade. I remember with my son, he came in and he was 10, and he, came home one day, the first time they had the class, and he told me all about what all they learned, what they talked about in school.
I think they talk about puberty in 5th grade, and then I think it kind of, I remember in high school is when I started getting comprehensive, sex ed was in high school, junior high, high school.
I really can't have an opinion unless I know, honestly, what and when in terms of what's the subject at what age.
And what do you think would be an appropriate, is it, let's talk about the most controversial part, which would be gender identity, LGBTQ issues. Do you think that's a high school? If you just had to I know you're not there yet with Natasha, but would it be middle school? Would it be high school?
My first instinct is that's a 9th grade, which would be high school subject. But certainly not. I'm pretty conservative. I don't want. That's not meant to be a political statement. That's just meant for me personally. I'm pretty conservative when I think about what I want my daughter taught. So to me, there are a lot of things that, quite frankly, I think should be no way in elementary school. And then she's in 7th grade right now. So, in the coming years, I would expect these subjects to be introduced. But I don't want much of anything introduced to her on this subject in elementary school.
What about middle school? Is kind of like that tipping point.
That's middle school.
In between.
6,
So
7,
how about in middle school? Because I'll tell you, my kids are talking about, and it's funny because they went through public primary school, kindergarten through 5th, basically the same group of kids in their classroom, these 30 kids, I guess, who they felt were all sort of like them, however you want to say that. Now they're getting into middle school, and suddenly the world is opening up in front of them, right? Because they're telling me about, I think this kid is transgender, Dad, or I think she's a lesbian. They're talking about different, so that's in 6th grade. They're seeing kids that they interact with on a daily basis who have different sort of views on life than they do. So shouldn't they be taught about that?
That's a big thing to kind of wrap your mind around, and so I think it's, if it's just an open conversation in school. And I don't know what the curriculum looks like. In Battleground, they were using a Seattle curriculum that was kind of controversial.
It was modeled after kind of curriculum that's being taught up in the Seattle area, King County area. It's called the FLASH program. And as we talked about LGBTQ issues, gender-related issues, there was a dad up in the Seattle area who actually had issue with that comprehensive sex ed program being taught because he says his daughter came home and couldn't really grasp, the difference between gender and sex, and he says, caused his daughter to question her own sexuality. So that was one concern from one dad who was kind of against the whole comprehensive sex ed thing in that area.
But I think you were making a really interesting point today of now that your kids are older and knowing kind of what we know, everyone was a kid. You can all remember what you knew that your parents didn't know you knew.
Right.
And it's always earlier, right? It's always earlier than your parents think it is.
Yes, and especially I would argue with this.
Oh, yeah.
Still, my oldest is 26 years old. And as access to the internet and to all these things that you can find on the internet that are completely unsavory, in my opinion, that was just starting to kind of be talked about. And they do. If you cut them off, like I know my son with his friends would look at different things, and you try and keep it out of your house, and then something's going to fly up. So they're exposed to a lot more than I was. But I was talking to both Drew and Nina offline during the show, and I thought, gosh, after raising 2 adults, I think I would do things differently because I was raised in a super, super, super conservative Christian household. And I didn't talk to my parents about a lot of things because their views, and they were very heartfelt. I totally respect that. You didn't have sex until you were married. There were just certain things that were not on the table for discussion.
Right.
And so I didn't discuss them with them. I kind of wish I had, but I felt a little uncomfortable.
Awkward. I mean, no matter
it's
who you are,
totally
it's
awkward.
so awkward.
And I kind of came out of that my way or the highway type raising my kids early on, and I don't really think that worked for my kids. Like looking back, I would have done it differently. And unlike me, they were very forthcoming. Sometimes I'm like, can't you have just the decency to hide it from me? Because I'm like, oh, you're stressing me out. They were
But wouldn't you rather know? I mean,
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Every
Absolutely.
parent I can imagine has no idea. You know, if you think your middle schooler doesn't know about something, they probably
know.
do.
And you know what? I mean, human sexuality is something that is normal.
Yeah.
And kids at a certain age, they're going to start thinking about that, and they should be armed with information. If you want to take care of that at home, that's great, but you should talk about it. And just to kind of veer a little bit, I also think it's odd to me. I've never quite gotten the thrust of, in our society, we glorify violence. We'll let little boys and little girls watch all kinds of movies. I go and I see some kids. I think you're way too young to be sitting in this theater. People are blowing other people to bits. But man, do not let them see a more intimate kiss or some kind of sexual innuendo. It's like you can't see that.
Good point.
It's like I don't really understand the violence versus the sex.
Yeah.
To me, it never
Rod,
made
to your
sense.
point, if we pull up that Facebook post, producer Jess, that I made this morning, Bill Gentile on there said, I do think that sex education ought to be made available at schools. It should be age appropriate, and the curriculum should be crafted with input from teachers, parents, and healthcare professionals so that there's a consensus as to what's to be taught, how, and for what age groups. As an alternative, perhaps a program for at-home teaching should be made available, as some parents might prefer to do that at home. Just my thoughts. Chris Kime says just the old school basics for procreation only with parent consent. And finally, James Moss says, sex ed is just that, education. With the parents signing off on it, it's fine. I had it in 5th grade in the late 60s. Things in many ways almost seemed more progressive and far more sensible then versus now. Again, it's just education.
We have so many people weighing in on this stream right now. Christine Lewis, absolutely, we can't depend on families, guardians, parents to cover everything kids need to know these days. I mean, a lot of people saying it depends on how things are presented, kind of, I think.
Well, that's another concern. I mean, you put a lot of faith, any parent, in the school district that you send your child to.
Absolutely.
And I don't care if it's the way they teach history, or in this case we're talking about sex education. But obviously most people are more touchy about certain subjects. And let's say this is one of the touchier subjects. You have more of a keen interest as a parent then in exactly what is being presented and how it's being presented.
Right. They sent, our school just sent notice home last Friday that, hey, next week we're going to be talking about suicide in wellness class and suicide prevention. You know, if you want to have that conversation with your kids at home, which we tried to do last night at dinner, and the boys were not cooperating with the conversation. They were too busy goofing off and fooling around. I was like, we're trying to have a serious conversation here. Because that is something that really is a concern of my wife's, is suicide amongst young people. You know, we were seeing it earlier and earlier now.
It's epidemic.
So you're right, though, Rod, because I think to myself, okay, they gave us a warning. We can have the conversation at home, but ultimately, I don't know exactly how it's going to be presented, what's going to be said in class tomorrow.
And I think, like, at your dinner table, you said it was, you know, they're goofing off and it's all super awkward. Like, Mom, Dad, this is so weird. But when you're in a classroom and you have to be quiet and you have to listen to the teacher and it's up and it's happening for however many minutes more until you're out of there, like, you're kind of forced to deal with it, you know, and learn something, versus at the table where you can talk back and fidget and, you know, like, leave. And I think it's kind of maybe a good venue to have it, because you see the teacher as hopefully, you know, a knowledgeable person, you know, that you're
Right.
supposed to be quiet and pay attention to. And at home, unfortunately, I mean, I was the exact same way. I'm just
Right.
like, oh, I don't want to talk about this. And it's just like so awkward. But I got more out of it from class.
I do like that they give you the heads up, though, at least our school does, because really the conversation, I think, should happen after. Like, I'm waiting to hear, hey, that's how it started last night. Hey, have they talked about this yet? And the answer was no, so maybe it's going to happen today or tomorrow. But you do want to hear, like, okay, how did they present it?
And
What
then
was
you
the
can
material?
ask them,
What did they tell you? And then you can weigh in and you can give your input or, you know.
You must be able to call parents who have that particular, you know,
Right.
question. It's like, what are you going to say?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
They said that in the email too. Yes,
Okay.
you can contact the office. This is the person at the school that's going to be presenting the material. If you want to email them, so yes, there were options for parents who had more questions to contact the school about that subject. You know, there are a lot of different lanes that you can take right now to be a part of this conversation that we're talking about, sex education in the classroom. And we mentioned at the very top of Sunrise Extra that there was a Facebook post on our KGW Facebook page. It's pinned to the top. It was created yesterday at 12:20. So many people, thousands literally weighing in and voting on this question of should sex education be a requirement in classrooms, and some really thoughtful replies. We always talk about, man, these people that go on these Facebook posts sometimes and just light us up and have these insensitive comments. But here's one that is completely sensitive to the point. Jenny Moore, she says, it's insulting to the intelligence of the population that this subject matter is still being debated. How utterly mired in backwards and oppressive shame are some people. She says, education fosters a well-functioning society in all ways. To live is an honor. Learning to live well honors life. My mother was a nurse. Human health exists properly in education without shame. She taught me this. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, that's very well said.
Jenny Moore.
Yeah, that's amazing. Our director, Brian Matthews, doesn't usually weigh in on the stream. He's usually in our ears, but he says, getting back to the whole violence thing that we were talking about versus sex, he says, when I flinch at stuff on TV or in movies, my son, a 6th grader now, is constantly saying, Dad, I hear way worse things than that from kids at school.
Wow.
To your point, we think that we're trying to shelter them and keep them away from
And
certain
they've
things,
already
and
heard it.
they get
Yeah.
out there and it's like, yeah, been there,
Your
done
point,
that.
Rod said no way in elementary school, right? So here, and I'm not totally against what you're saying, but 3rd grade, going back 3 years now, in a situation in our house where out of the blue, you know, we're sitting there and one of the boys says, how does a woman get pregnant? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for this conversation right now. I kind of look at me like, what, are we answering this right now? This is happening now?
Right now?
And she goes, well, you know, let's talk, I'm not ready to talk about all that right now. Let's have a conversation later. And then he tells us that so-and-so at school says it happens when the man puts his penis in the woman's butt. And he's like, and I'm sitting there like, oh my God. Again, 3rd grade, Rod. We're 9 years old at this point.
Yeah.
So then me, again, I'm like looking to bail. I don't know how to handle this. And me goes, tell so-and-so that that is absolutely not true. That's not how it happens. I can tell you that right now. That is not how a woman gets pregnant. Okay, we move on with the night. Next night comes back. So-and-so says, you don't know what you're talking about, Mom. That's exactly how it happened.
What?
Yes.
Oh
So,
my
and then
gosh.
that's when we got on the phone. We know this family, you know. Got on the phone and said, hey, we got to talk. Here's what so-and-so was saying.
Oh, man, I have
okay,
such
we'll have a talk.
awkward
It was
conversations
crazy.
Did you
ahead.
set him straight, though, at some point?
Well, like I said, Mia talked to Boy's mom. I
Right.
was almost afraid to say boy-girl, but Boy's mom. Boy's mom was totally like, thanks for letting me know. She apparently had the conversation with him. I don't know where it went from there, but we told the boys, yeah, it is not how it goes down.
But did you tell him how it did go down,
that
so to
night,
speak?
again, they know about it now.
Okay.
Yes, they know about it now.
Well, you
Did
know
they
what?
know about it the next night? I can't remember how explicit we got.
But do you see how uncomfortable
Yes.
all of us are? I mean, it
And
is
you can't
weird.
put the grade on it yourself.
I
You have
know,
to.
the
love that
first
they
time you
came out
hear
and
it
asked
like
you
that.
that. Like,
Yes.
you
No, it's
hear
pretty
that on the
cool.
playground, and I would have never brought, you know, I would have been like, oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
wow. But I would
they
never have brought that up
recognize-
with my parents.
It's like they
Let me
recognize that
tell-
Mia can handle it, and
Yeah.
that she knows what
That's
to say.
awesome that you guys are like,
Right.
you know, cool like that,
She-
and they can just ask you whatever.
If they saw just me sitting there, they'd be like, don't even bring it up to that
But you
guy.
know what? I've done the flip side. How about this story? I don't think, I know I've never told it on TV before, but Zach was 2nd grade, and he went to school with a boy who was the baby of a big family.
Oh, yeah.
So now he has brothers or sisters, whatever it was. They're in their upper teens to 20s. And Zach, I will never forget this, comes home, 7 years old, I'm in the kitchen, and he's got my big dark brown eyes, and he looks at me and he said, Mom, so-and-so says that his brother says that boys kiss girls down there. And I was like, my mind did a flip-flop, and I said, that is absolutely not true. Because I thought, I am not going there with my 7-year-old.
Yes.
But it was like, I panicked.
Oh my
I honestly
you can prep for it and prep
it's
for it, but
tough,
then when
man.
you're washing a dish and you're like,
I was
oh, this is
panicking.
now.
It's like I'm not having, no.
So tough.
And
So
that's
I've
why
done
dads
it
can
right
honestly
and I've done it
depend.
wrong, and it's
Go
like,
ask
oh
your
my
mother.
God. Yeah, ask your mother.
Go ask
exactly.
your mother.
If
There
you
you
think
go.
you're doing it right, Chris, that came up more recently, not in 3rd grade, but like, I'll say a couple months ago. What's oral sex, Dad? You know, and I thought to myself, I'm in the car, I'm thinking, I don't want to answer this one either. Then I thought of you, Brenda. Not really, but I did think, like, I know I'm supposed to handle this one. It shouldn't be all on my wife. So I'm like, I'll tell you what oral sex is.
Talking during sex. That is the
I
answer.
told him the truth, but I talked about, I guess, a woman performing it with a man.
Sure.
And I thought I did it well and very technical. I'm sorry to make you
I
uncomfortable.
just never
But
thought
then
we'd
they
be
go like
sitting
this.
in our workplace, like talking
Right,
about
this is very
but
interesting.
This is what
All right,
we're talking about.
here's what I was
sorry.
ready for. So I think I'm the man. I'm a good dad. I just handled it. And then it's like, why would you want to do that?
Oh man.
Then I don't have an answer for that, right? I'm like,
There's nothing on TV.
Why? Why?
you know what? Some people think that feels good.
And
Why?
that's a legitimate
Hey guys, come on,
answer.
enough. You know,
yeah.
how far do I have to take this conversation?
That's a
that is
legitimate
Thank
answer.
goodness I have a daughter and not twin boys.
What awkward conversation.
I'm sick of my stomach.
I am not there yet.
I mean,
Well, it
man, I'm
just
just
is.
thinking, like, yeah, what? Just putting yourself
Yes.
in that position of, like, you think you're like, okay, we're going to the store, like, I got to pick her up, and then that comes from the back
Yes.
seat, and you're just like, oh,
It's
right now,
terrible.
like, I'm not prepared.
Nope. I thought we
you
were
just-
talking about the World Series. No, we're talking about the world at large.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. You guys are awesome. I mean, they really, seriously, everybody. I can't even get to all of them because I've got to go do the Today Show.
And the
cut it.
music is playing.
But this
Thank
has been an
goodness.
This is a really
interesting conversation.
I mean,
it's
yeah.
important.
Boy, you guys have opened my eyes. Opened my eyes. for a
Get ready,
2-year-old.
girls.
I feel like after the show, I got to tell you what the oral sex thing is all
All
about.
right. We'll save that for later.